Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're plunging headfirst into history's most, well, perplexing questions and stories. And today we're tackling a real big one, a mystery that's so enduring, it's baffling, it's captivated people for centuries. I'm talking about the disappearance of the Roanoke colony, often called the Lost Colony, right?
Yeah.
This was England's first, let's say, ambitious attempt to set up shop permanently in North America. And then, poof. They seem to just vanish.
That's absolutely right. And our mission today really is to sift through, the historical accounts, the archaeology, even the modern science. We want to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights about what happened to these early colonists. Think of it as a shortcut for you to understand one of history's really great enigmas. We've looked at everything from centuries-old documents right up to cutting-edge climate analysis.
It's a story that's just brimming with these grand visions, but also desperate struggles and just enough cryptic clues to keep us all guessing. So, yeah, maybe grab a coffee. Okay, let's unpack this thing. All right, so our journey starts with this pretty extraordinary vision. Back in 1584, Queen Elizabeth I gives Sir Walter Raleigh a charter. The goal: establish an English presence in the New World, this huge area he grandly named Virginia. And he had a deadline, right? Had to get a colony going by 1591 or lose his rights. But the interesting bit maybe is that Raleigh himself, he was forbidden from leaving the Queen's side, so he had to delegate these huge missions. What does that kind of tell us about those early days?
Well, it tells us a couple of things, I think. First, the Crown's interest was absolutely central, even over the, direct involvement of its big players. Second, it shows just how much trust Raleigh put in his deputies. He pretty quickly sent out an initial scouting trip in 1584. Philip Amatus and Arthur Barlow led it. And their reports back were, well, glowing. They described this abundant land, surprisingly friendly relations with local tribes like the Secatan. They met a chief named Granganamo, and they even brought back 2 Native Americans, Wanchese and Manteo, to England. Can you imagine the stir that caused and the valuable insights they brought back about this new world?
Wow, yeah, that must have been quite something back in London. So, okay, buoyed by these reports, Raleigh launches the first actual colony attempt in 1585. Governor Ralph Lane is in charge. They set up a military outpost on Roanoke Island.
Yeah.
But this wasn't exactly smooth sailing, was it?
No, far from it. This first venture, it ran into trouble almost immediately. Lane's colony suffered from a real lack of supplies. And despite those initial positive reports, relations with some local tribes just went downhill fast. There's this pretty infamous incident where the English burned an entire village, Aquascogok, apparently over a missing silver cup. It just shows how quickly things could spiral, right? Over seemingly small things. Anyway, Lane eventually just gave up, abandoned the colony, and sailed back to England with Sir Francis Drake in 1586. And the kicker is, Sir Richard Grenville arrived with the resupply ships just weeks later. He found the place empty. So he made this, fateful decision. Left a small group, 15 men, behind to hold on to England's claim.
Just 15 guys, left alone to hold down the fort. So what happened to them? Did they make it?
Well, according to later reports, specifically from the Croatan tribe, Grenville's men were attacked by mainland tribes not long after he left. Apparently, 13 survivors managed to flee the island in their boat, but they were just never seen again. It's a really grim prologue, isn't it, to the more famous story?
A truly grim start.
Yeah.
And yet, Raleigh, he wasn't put off by this double failure, really. He launched another expedition in 1587. And this is the one we always think of as the Lost Colony.
Right.
What made this attempt different? Why is this the one everyone focuses on?
Yeah, this one was fundamentally different. It wasn't just a military post this time. It was meant to be a permanent civilian settlement, a proper English town. Crucially, it included women and children. That marks a big shift from just exploration or military goals to, actual colonization. Among them were John White's own pregnant daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband, Ananias Dare. And their original destination, it's important to note, was actually meant to be further north, a place they called the City of Raleigh on the Chesapeake Bay, which seemed much more promising.
Okay, so Chesapeake Bay was the plan. But they ended up back on Roanoke Island, the place with all the previous trouble. How did that happen?
Right. That's a really crucial and kind of baffling turn of events. The ship's pilot, a guy named Simon Fernandez, he basically refused to sail further. Despite the original orders, despite Governor John White protesting like mad, Fernandez forced them to disembark and stay on Roanoke Island. Why? Well, historians still debate it. Maybe he was just tired of sailing. Maybe he wanted to get on with some privateering, raiding Spanish ships. Whatever his reason, forcing them onto that island, familiar but also hostile territory, it basically set the stage for the whole mystery.
Wow. Okay. And it's on this island, August 18, 1587, that this remarkable event happens. Virginia Dare is born, the first Christian born in Virginia, as they say. A moment that, would become huge in American myth much later.
Yeah.
So the colony is established, Virginia Dare is born, and then John White leaves. Why on earth did he leave?
Well, the colonists themselves persuaded him. They were facing dwindling supplies already. The harsh realities of setting up in a new place were hitting home. They basically begged him to go back to England for more provisions. So he left in August 1587, promising he'd be back quickly. But, of course, neither he nor they knew what was coming. The Anglo-Spanish War was brewing. And that led to the Spanish Armada crisis. This huge naval war effectively blocked White from getting back to the colony. Not for weeks, not for months, but for 3 agonizing years.
3 years. I mean, that must have felt like an absolute eternity for those colonists left behind. So when White finally makes it back, it's August 18th, 1590, which incredibly was his granddaughter Virginia's 3rd birthday. What did he find? This is where it gets, well, really chilling.
It was chilling, yeah. He found the settlement area fortified, with a palisade, but it was completely eerily abandoned. And then he found the clues, the famous clues. The word Croatoan carved into one of the main palisade posts, and just CRO carved into a nearby tree. Now, White had an agreement with them before he left. If they had to relocate, they'd carve their destination. But, and this is crucial, if they were forced out, if they left under attack or duress, they were supposed to carve a cross pate, a specific kind of cross above the name.
Ah, the cross.
Exactly. And the key thing was, there was no cross. So White took this to mean they had relocated peacefully. Gone to Croatoan Island, which is now Hatteras Island, home to a friendly tribe they knew. He also noted there were no signs of a struggle, no bodies, no graves, but the houses had been taken down, dismantled, and his own trunks, stuff he'd buried for safekeeping, had been dug up and looted. Oh, and none of the colony's boats, their pinnace or smaller boats, were found anywhere near the settlement.
Okay, so the signs seem to point towards a planned move to Croatoan Island. But White didn't actually go there to check, did he?
He couldn't. Almost unbelievably, after everything, bad weather blew up, rough seas, a storm, they lost an anchor, the ships were in danger, the captain basically refused to risk it, they were forced to abandon the search and head back to England. And that decision, really born of bad luck and bad weather, it sealed the colony's fate as lost. It became this enduring enigma we're still talking about today.
So after White's, desperate and failed attempt to find them in 1590, the trail just goes cold for a bit.
Yeah.
What efforts were made right afterwards? Were they, serious about finding them?
Well, initially the investigations seemed quite limited, and maybe not as focused as you might think. Sir Walter Raleigh himself, yes, he claimed he searched for them, but later on he kind of admitted some of those claims were maybe misdirection. He was really focused on finding El Dorado, the legendary city of gold in South America. He did fund a mission in 1602 led by Samuel Mace, but its main goal seems to have been harvesting sassafras, which was super valuable back then, not really a dedicated search and rescue for the colonists. It kind of shows how even Raleigh, their patron, had his priorities shift towards, profit, gold, resources, over finding the settlers. And then, of course, Raleigh got arrested for treason in 1603. That ended his Virginia charter and his direct involvement.
Right, so Raleigh was distracted, then sidelined. Did anyone else pick up the search in those early years?
Oh, yes. The Jamestown colonists, definitely. When they arrived further north in 1607, they were very interested. People like Captain John Smith, William Strachey, they conducted their own inquiries between about 1607 and 1609. John Smith, in particular, got some really intriguing reports from various Native American tribes about, Europeans living in the area. Some talked about men wearing European clothes, living in walled houses. Specifically, he heard about 4 men clothed that came from Roanoke to Okanahawan. Okanahawan was a village near what's now called Pacriconic, and this info is actually included on a famous map, the Zuniga map, a copy the Spanish ambassador got hold of.
Interesting. Now, I've also heard this claim, maybe controversial, that Chief Powhatan, Pocahontas' father, confessed to massacring the colonists. Is there anything to that?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating point, but it's highly debated among historians. A writer named Samuel Purchas made that claim in 1625, said Powhatan confessed it to Captain Smith. But many historians today, people like Helen Roundtree, they pretty much dismiss this. They see it as anti-Indian polemic,
Yeah.
basically propaganda to make Native Americans look savage, especially when there was conflict between them and the Jamestown settlers. And the really crucial thing, John Smith himself, who wrote extensively about his time in Virginia and his interactions with Powhatan, never once mentions this supposed confession in his own writings. It really highlights how careful you have to be with sources, and thinking about their potential biases.
Good point. Okay, let's jump forward a bit into the 18th century. Did anyone else explore the area and find anything interesting?
Absolutely. There's another really compelling account from a guy named John Lawson. He explored Hatteras Island, which, remember, is likely Croatoan Island between 1701 and 1709. And Lawson's findings, pretty remarkable. He met the Hatteras people living there. He noted some of them had gray eyes, which was unusual, and they claimed they had white ancestors. He also observed they had noticeable English cultural influences, even some English words in their language. Lawson's theory was basically that the 1587 colonists had assimilated, blended into this community after they just lost hope of ever seeing an English ship again. He also found, back on Roanoke Island itself, the remains of an old fort, some English coins, bits of firearms, even a powder horn, more evidence of early European presence.
That integration with local tribes theory, especially with the Croatoans on Hatteras, it really does seem to make a lot of sense, especially with the Croatoan carving. What makes that idea so, well, enduring?
It just seems logical, right? You have this group of colonists facing starvation, maybe disease, harsh conditions. It makes perfect sense they'd seek refuge, maybe help from friendly local tribes. And the Croatoans were known to be friendly, unlike some others. And there's this pattern throughout history, actually. Europeans who were removed from European society, maybe captured, maybe chose to leave, and integrated into Native American communities. They were often quite reluctant to go back to their old lives, even if given the chance. So yeah, this theory has been linked strongly to the Hatteras people, who are widely seen as Croatan descendants. Also, the Lumbee tribe in North Carolina, they were actually officially called Croatan Indians by the state legislature back in 1885. They retain certain surnames and linguistic quirks that some researchers believe connect them to the colonists. And other tribes, like the Catawba and Coree, sometimes get mentioned in connection with this too.
Now, more recently, I remember headlines in 2020. A researcher, Scott Dawson, claimed, "The mystery is over." Did he actually solve it?
Well, not according to many mainstream archaeologists. People like Elaine Outlaw and Nick Lucchetti pushed back pretty hard. They basically said his conclusions were more like storytelling, not really based on solid, verifiable evidence. They said there was no smoking gun. And actually, Dawson himself, in his own book, admitted there wasn't a single piece of definitive proof, no smoking gun. It's just a reminder, isn't it, that while these tantalizing theories pop up, you always need that solid, evidence-based foundation in history and archaeology.
Okay, so if that definitive answer is still out there, how are modern science and archaeology trying to crack this? What new tools are they using?
Well, modern science has offered some really, really intriguing insights. Like back in 1998, climate scientists David Stahl and Dennis Blanton, they did this amazing study using tree rings from ancient bald cypress trees in the area. And their research concluded that right when the colony was trying to establish itself, between 1587 and 1589, the region suffered an absolutely extreme drought, like the worst growing season in 800 years. Now that is a critical piece of the puzzle. Think about it. You've got the pilot forcing them onto an island they didn't want to be on, possibly with hostile neighbors nearby, and then bam, the worst drought in centuries hits. It creates this perfect storm, doesn't it? Environmental pressure, social pressure. Survival would have been incredibly tough. Relocation, almost certainly necessary.
That makes total sense. I mean, a massive drought, lack of food that would force anyone to move or seek help. What about genetics? DNA. We hear about DNA solving old mysteries all the time now. Has that helped here?
Yeah. There have been efforts. Roberta Estes has been leading work on genetic analysis since around 2005, trying to find a genetic link between the colonists' potential descendants and known Native American groups like the Lumbee or Hatteras. But the challenge with something this old, centuries old, it's just immense. The kind of DNA used for genealogy tests, autosomal DNA, it gets mixed up every generation. So tracing it back that far is incredibly difficult, almost impossible. You can potentially use Y chromosome DNA passed father to son or mitochondrial DNA passed mother to child. Those stay more stable. But you need something to compare it to, either undisputed remains of colonists, which we don't have, or a clear documented genetic line from a known descendant. So as of the latest reports, around 2019, they hadn't found conclusive results proving a direct link that way.
Right, and archaeology has its own massive challenges too, doesn't it? It's not just digging, there's time and nature working against you.
Yeah, absolutely. A huge factor on Roanoke Island itself is shoreline erosion. Just between 1851 and 1970, the northern end of the island, where the settlements probably were, lost almost 1,000 feet of shoreline to the Sound. 928 feet to be exact. So it's highly likely, almost certain, that parts of the original settlements are just underwater now, gone, along with any clues they held. And finding conclusive artifacts is tough too. Remember the Kendall ring, found on Hatteras Island in '98. Initially, people thought it was this amazing gold signet ring linked to the colony. Turned out later analysis showed it was brass, so inconclusive. To be really sure, archaeologists ideally want something unambiguous, like female remains buried Christian style dated before 1650, or artifacts that are absolutely unique to the 1587 colony, things that couldn't have come from Lane's 1585 group or later traders.
But there have been some exciting finds, like this Site X discovery. That sounds almost like something out of, I don't know, a spy movie.
It really does. Back in 2011, researchers were looking closely at John White's map from 1585, the La Virginia Pars map. They noticed these little patches on it. When the British Museum examined it with things like X-rays and light tables, they found a faint outline of a fort symbol hidden under one patch, possibly drawn in invisible ink like lemon juice or something. And its location was inland, at the confluence of the Roanoke and Chown rivers, near a native village called Metaquem, the theory. Maybe this was a planned secondary location, kept secret, possibly hidden from the Spanish. Since 2015, archaeologists have been digging at this Site X, and they have found fragments of English pottery from the right period, Tudor pottery, bits of weapons. It suggests a small group of colonists might have actually lived there, maybe peacefully alongside the local Whippamiaq people. The challenge, again, is being 100% sure these aren't leftover bits from the 1585 Lane colony, or from later English traders like Nathaniel Batts, who was in the area later. So they're looking for very specific things from that 1587 window, like pottery styles without later developments, like clay tobacco pipes, which came later.
And didn't Mark Horton's digs on Hatteras Island, finding European stuff like part of a sword and gun within a Native American village site, doesn't that really add weight to the assimilation idea? That seems like the strongest lead we have.
It really does. Horton's finds on Hatteras are incredibly significant, I think. Finding European artifacts directly mixed in with native artifacts in a village context strongly supports that idea of integration, colonists living with or alongside the Croatoan people. Now, besides assimilation, there are other theories, though most have less evidence. Some suggest the colonists tried to build their own boat, a pinnace, to sail back to England and maybe got lost at sea. Like what happened to some French settlers earlier at Charlesford. Possible, but no proof. Spanish attack. Well, Spain definitely worried about an English base for piracy there, and they were looking for the colony. But records show they were still searching in 1600, suggesting they hadn't found and destroyed it earlier. Then you get more, well, conspiratorial theories. Lee Miller suggested Sir Francis Walsingham deliberately sabotaged Raleigh's efforts, maybe marooning or even enslaving the colonists. But most historians find that lacks solid evidence. There's the secret sassafras operation idea, that Raleigh secretly used them to harvest valuable sassafras at a place called Beachland. But again, the economics of sassafras prices back then, and the fact Grenville made good money just raiding, make that seem unlikely. And finally, those Dare stones, a series of rocks found in the 1930s with inscriptions supposedly written by Eleanor Dare detailing the colony's feat. Almost all are considered elaborate fakes now, though the very first one found still has a few defenders based on some linguistic or chemical points, but generally they're seen as a hoax.
Wow. Okay, so the mystery, it clearly hasn't just obsessed historians and archaeologists. It's sunk deep into our culture, right? Become almost a foundational American myth.
Oh, absolutely. Even way back in 1597, Sir Francis Bacon was publicly criticizing Raleigh for, quote, forsaking the plantation. So it was being talked about very early on.
Yeah.
And there was even a play in 1605 called Eastward Ho! That joked about the colonists maybe intermarrying with Native Americans and creating a whole country of English over there. So speculation was right from the start.
But it was really George Bancroft's history book in 1834, A History of the United States, that kind of cemented it, right? He really framed Raleigh and especially Virginia Dare as these foundational figures, and that captured the American imagination. It shifted the narrative from just a failed colonial venture to this romantic, tragic origin story.
Exactly. And the actual phrase, the Lost Colony, really took off in 19th century historical novels, like one by Eliza Lanesford Cushing in 1837. These stories often depicted Virginia Dare surviving, being raised by Native Americans. Cornelia Tuthill's 1840 story even introduced this fantastical idea that Virginia could transform into a white doe. Pure myth-making. And it's worth noting, sadly, that in the early 20th century, this romanticized story, particularly the focus on Virginia Dare's purity, sometimes got twisted and used by white nationalist groups, which is a really problematic legacy.
Yet right there on Roanoke Island today, the story lives on in a very direct way through that huge outdoor drama, The Lost Colony. Paul Green wrote it. It opened way back in 1937. FDR himself attended the opening. And it still runs every summer. It's a massive tourist attraction, keeps the story alive for new generations.
It certainly does. And then, of course, you have that single word, Croatoan. It's just taken on this whole other life in paranormal circles and pop culture. You see it pop up in stories by Harlan Ellison. Stephen King used it chillingly in Storm of the Century. It's been in TV shows like Supernatural, American Horror Story, usually presented as some kind of supernatural warning or a demon's name or a way to banish evil, completely detached from its actual historical context, you know? It just shows how one ambiguous clue from the past can spark these entirely new layers of myth and meaning.
So, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, it's just so clear, isn't it? The mystery of Roanoke really endures. It's this compelling mix of, well, historical accounts, archaeological digs, scientific analysis, all trying to piece together a puzzle that still has these huge missing pieces. And it really makes you think how little we sometimes truly know about crucial moments in history, even when we spend centuries trying to figure them out.
Exactly right. While we have some strong theories, particularly that idea of assimilation with local tribes, especially the Croatoan on Hatteras Island, that absolute proof, that smoking gun, it's still elusive. What's really fascinating, I think, is how this one event, this one disappearance, just continues to fuel so much research, so much speculation, and so many stories centuries later. It's really a testament to the power of an unanswered question in history.
So what does this all mean for you listening? And maybe think about how just one word carved into a wooden post hundreds of years ago can launch centuries of searching and storytelling. It's a pretty powerful reminder that history isn't always about finding neat, clear answers. Sometimes it's about the compelling questions themselves, the things that drive us to keep digging, keep exploring, keep trying to understand.
And maybe that leads us to a final thought for you to chew on. Despite all the research we've talked about, all the theories, if you could ask just one single question to one of the Roanoke colonists, knowing they could answer truthfully about their fate, what would that question be? And maybe, what does your choice of question tell you about our own deep desire to connect with and understand the past, even the parts that seem forever lost?